Order the regular meeting of the Public Safety Committee for November 7th, 2019. Roll call, please.
Alderperson Alms.
Here.
Alderperson Hall. Here. Alderperson Morset is excused.
All right. Minutes of the regular meeting from October 10th. Did you
Move
get
to
it?
approve.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Discussion and possible action on request for no parking on Heritage Boulevard. Chief, you got an email that you forwarded to us?
Yep. So I got an email from Marcella, who indicated she's concerned about the safety issues with people parked on both sides of the street up on Heritage Boulevard. With the kids and now that the snow coming. It's the only complaint we've got. I guess, for me, I'd like to see what the other residents think.
And we received, I don't know if you saw that email too, we received an email this afternoon.
And for those of you that don't know him, he's my lieutenant
Mhm.
at the police department. So she caught wind. He lives up in that area. He doesn't know why this is even being considered. So that's why he sent an email. I haven't read the email, so I don't know what it said, but.
He asked that we postpone until the residents can be here to talk about it and show up. So I will move that we put this on the next month's agenda so that the residents have time to give us input.
And I will second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We'll have that on the next agenda then. Thank you. All right, moving on to discussion and possible action to conduct Empowered Women Half Marathon 5K on Saturday, September 20th, 2020, beginning and ending at White Camp Park. Do you know if they were going to be?
They were not, I don't think, able to make it today.
Okay.
But they have had this event at least last year. I think it was the year before also.
Was this the same route? I'm sorry to interrupt.
I don't have the map with me.
Okay.
I believe it was the same route as the one they did last year, or this year, actually. It's so early this year that
Right.
they're asking for it. I believe it's the same route.
Because I think they were,
Yes.
last year they requested downtown Riverfront, and then we moved it out there, if I remember that whole discussion.
That may have been a different one.
Oh, that may have been, okay.
This appears to be the same map.
I remember last year we were concerned about the construction on Hanley
That's right.
interrupting or interfering with their
In
plan.
in 18. Yeah,
Yep.
and then they just had it here a couple months ago.
All right.
And it went fine. They hire a police officer to help with the crossing of Hanley Road at O'Neill there.
Right.
And then they have field marshals with safety vests, right, and assist with the route. Their intention, they said, is to have that happen again this time, in 2020.
So I guess my question is there any coordination that needs to happen? Is that town of Troy or is that town of Hudson? You know, the Glover Road and the Chinook Lane, just south of Cooley?
It's town of Troy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Town of Troy. Is there any coordination that needs to happen there, or?
I don't know if they have to go there for approval. I'm sure they do,
Sure.
but I don't know.
But this is the same route that they did.
This is the
so-
same road, yeah, we help them out with it. There hasn't been an issue. There's plenty of parking up there for their folks.
Great.
I'll move to approve contingent on them following the same safety procedures as last time with the hiring a police officer and having the, what'd you call them?
Field marshals?
Field marshals.
Yeah.
I'll second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Discussion and possible action to conduct hot air affair, February 7th through the 9th, 2020.
Is this mine again?
Yeah, it looks like it's a typo on the
Yeah, it
issue
says
sheet.
2019 on the issue
But it's
sheet.
2020.
Yeah.
Is there anything different?
The only thing that's different, I think, is the Fat Tire Bike Race in Lakefront Park.
Okay.
on the walking path and through the woods, down
Gotcha.
to about, I think it's Orange Street and then back.
Have we ever done like a fat tire race in that?
Not for that event. It's been done, but not for that event. Yeah.
Gotcha. Any safety concerns with that from your
It's all
end?
contained within the park, so.
Right.
Okay, move
What
to
do you think?
approve.
And I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Discussion and possible action on traffic and pedestrian safety around the high school. This was an email sent by staff at the school about concerns about crossing Hanley, or not Hanley, crossing Carmichael. Is that right?
Yeah. Which
The
one
high
are we on?
school is
We're
gonna
on
be
number
behind-
6, which is the high school.
That'd be like
The
Oak and
six.
Chestnut.
Different
and
school one.
Fillmore and 11th.
Okay.
Fillmore, what's that?
There's 31 here.
Yeah, number 6 is.
Oh, this
behind
is the high school. This is the high
Yeah,
school
number
piece.
7
I'm
is the
sorry.
middle school.
That's right. So, Joyce, this is
Yeah.
kind of,
Okay, so at our last meeting, we discussed this and expressed the concerns, and then we started doing a little bit of research. So Jeff called and talked to Eric Anderson over at the planning group in Eau Claire, and they're the ones who coordinated the Safe Routes to School. And so he suggested that I talk to Eric as well. And so when I talked to Eric, he offered to come out and do some observations and write up a memo of his observations and recommendations, which I forwarded on to everyone, or to Jeff and to people at the school district as well. And then I got in touch with Tim Erickson also, who is the chief financial officer over the school district. And then I talked to Nick Willett this afternoon also, so that we can coordinate things. So anyway, Tim Erickson, he said that he's been meeting with city staff, so I understand that he's talked to that. He wants to develop a plan for the TAP application. So TAP is Transportation Alternatives Program funding. Those are grants. The grants, the current round of grants, the application process is open now. The awards will be made next summer, probably in August or so, and with the money available for 2021. So we need to start working on getting those applications together. Then I also recommended that to Tim Erickson that we recommend that the city look and the school district look into Bremer grants as well, because they also have, they weight the grant applications a little bit better, if I remember correctly, with the Bremer grants, if they are a cooperative effort between different entities. And so having something that would be between the school district and the city would probably be useful for the applications. Because one of the things that's going to come up is going to be installing sidewalks, which of course is not going to be a popular thing for with the person who has whose property they're going to be on. So if we can get them paid for through a grant, that might make things a little more palatable for the people who might be expected to have sidewalks. Anyway, Tim said that he was going to start some meetings between the city and the school district, and that he would probably be reconvening the Safe Routes to School Committee. So I said, that's music to my ears. I've been saying, well, let's get that going again. So anyway, we're getting things started. So Dean spent a morning, met me behind the high school at 7 o'clock in the morning, and we did some observations, so.
Yeah, so Dean Chamberlain, city engineer, thank you for having me. Yeah, I like Joyce said, she invited me out to her house one morning in October. So we kind of looked at what was going on out there. A lot of as Eric's observations were similar to the things that we noticed as we were out there. Since then, I have a few more observations that I've just seen regarding traffic, speed limits, pavement, et cetera, out there. I don't necessarily need to go through here, but depending kind of on how the discussion goes tonight, we can kind of take those as well. But yeah, there wasn't anything I saw in his list of of observations that I didn't agree with out there. I think there's definitely some issues that we've seen that the residents are seeing and stuff. It's just kind of what makes sense to do on like a short-term basis, a long-term basis, who's paying for it, all that kind of stuff is kind of what we have to figure out with that.
Well, and in my talk with Nick Willett this afternoon, one of the things that he emphasized was, all right, we're talking about sidewalks around the high school. He said, we need sidewalks around some of the grade schools as well. And so he wanted to make sure that the city doesn't lose track of that Safe Routes to School K through 8 plan and the recommendations made there. And so I think that the big thing is going to be putting together a plan that will incorporate all of the schools, including the high school, and then the steps and priorities, so that we know. He pointed out, the grade school children should be a higher priority than the high schoolers, since the grade school children need better protection. But I believe that they should be a high priority item for the city to take care of the safety issues. So
where do you see this going, Joyce? And I guess my first question is, what do you see as the next step?
What do I see as the next step? I think we staff need to kumbaya and get together to actually sit down and talk about, what data do we still need, start to actually formulate a plan with data behind it, and not just, I think this, I think this could work, versus like, what are some evidence supported, measures that can work on a short-term basis, long-term basis. Like I said, if it's something as simple as paint on the ground, like that's easy to implement. Unfortunately, it's so cold outside that you can't even put paint on the ground right now. But
yeah, nothing can be done until the spring for the most part.
That's some stuff that we could do at that point in time. So we have some time over the winter to be thinking about it on a
And now that
more
we
deep
have
level.
now that we have a city engineer,
Yes,
it makes a lot more sense for staff. I mean, this should be really a staff problem, right? And staff should get together and
Yes.
talk and meet with the school district. And just like the Safe Routes to School it was all of our city staff, school district administration that sat down, some other civilian members, right, that sat down and tried to formulate a plan based on the study. That's staff's job. That's
Yeah.
what we should be doing. So I think you have to give us time to sit down
Sure.
and meet and talk about it and formulate a plan. And then once we get a plan, bring it back and say,
Yeah.
okay, this is what we've come up with for ideas. What do you guys think?
yeah. No, I would like to see that done. I wasn't trying to take over things. I was just trying to get the ball rolling on this. And I'm glad to see that it's getting moving, because it's needed. And then I've talked to Mike Mirage also about the issues on Oak Street and on Fillmore, that those streets need to be redone. So it's all part of the plan. So I guess I would think that one of the next steps should be, so for example, Eric Anderson from Eau Claire said his observations were just a start. It was only one morning. It wasn't, the afternoon. It was raining out, so he and he felt that a full study should be done. So that would be the first question that I would want to know would be, is he available to do a study, a full study, or if not, or who would do the study, and how much would it cost, and when can we get it done?
And I would ask, would that be maybe a next step that staff comes to us? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, you're working together with the school district and whatnot. If it's beyond your parameters, is that something that you feel comfortable coming to this body and saying, hey, look, we need to maybe look at doing a study? Or is that a fair statement, or?
You know, I think that, I think we have the resources to do a lot of the data
In-house?
and analysis in-house.
Okay. Good.
It's kind of just a workload thing, but if, I don't foresee a problem with that. And if it is a workload thing, you know, we always have SEH or Bolton and Mank to rely on to help us out with that stuff. And if Eric is available and able to help us out with it if we need it, we at least have resources to reach out to if we need to. So I would feel comfortable with keeping it in-house and developing it ourselves, but that'll save costs for sure.
Right on. Do you think that we could see some sort of update by spring of 2020?
Oh yeah, I think over the winter we can definitely get a plan together. I would think. I you know, like I said, we have all winter to think about it and whatnot. So
I'd like to keep this on the agenda for the meetings as a,
check.
yeah, check in so that we know that what's been happening and where things are going, and just, because I need to know, because I've got constituents who are hounding me about this, and I want to make sure that I have up-to-date information to give them when they expect me to call them back and let them know what's going on. So,
And do you see that as a function of this body that we should review it, or?
I think it's a good idea to just, get an update each month, then that way.
Is that a fair request? Okay. Is that a motion then?
I'll make the motion to get an update each month.
Do we have other things we need to talk about on this?
Yeah, we do, like.
I think there's several things
safety
associated with this issue.
Yes. So, all right, well, but we can at least, I can make the motion about having updates on what the city engineer.
Well, I think so. I just didn't want you to move on without talking.
No, we got more.
Yeah, good point, good point.
Okay, so I'll make the motion that we continue to get updates each month at our Public Safety Committee meeting.
And I'll second that, but do we need any more formal action to direct staff to work with, or has that already been?
Yeah.
What would you
Well,
feel most
yes.
comfortable with?
What do we need to do?
Good evening, Michael Miraz, Director of Public Works. I guess what we need, direction for staff would be, what are we looking at doing? Do you want to direct staff to do temporary solutions? Do we want to look at a full build out? Do we want to correct the problems behind the school, indefinitely? Do we want to, put together a full set of plans, what it would be to, because Oak Street's in bad shape.
Yes.
It needs to be replaced. Well, if we're going to be replacing that, we're going to put in curb and gutter, storm sewer, sidewalks, so on and so forth. We're going to go for the whole 9 yards if we're going to start touching the asphalt. So is it, and this is kind of conversations that will come out of the meetings with the school district,
Right.
is are we looking to get by with just a sidewalk right now? Or are we looking to do full-fledged, build out and apply for that TAP grant and do that? So, I mean, and it's going to be kind of restrictive as far as what the grant is for, what the reimbursements are for. If it is just for trails, have you applied for a TAP grant before?
I've helped in
You've had.
applying for TAP grants.
So is it more just pedestrian accommodations, or is it?
Yeah, it's transportation alternatives, so
Yeah.
Yes.
it's focused on pedestrians, bicycles, transit users, all.
Right, so we might be able to pair, the TAP grant with a, Tiger grant, SDP urban grant, LRIP grant in the future, and do a full scale, do it correctly, right? So I think due to the time constraints and just what's happening up there, and I think we direct staff to come up with, a traffic study, preliminary engineering review on temporary solutions for the 2021 season, right? And then from there, then we can start identifying some of these revenue sources, how we're going to pay for the improvements. Is the school district going to kick anything in? So on and so forth, because right now, we really have nothing identified in the CIP over the next 5 years. I mean, this has kind of been thrown out of the dark at us. So there's nothing really identified for Oak Street improvements, anything like that. So that's another thing that'll have to come from a council directive during the bonding cycle so we can get it in the plan, because I know some grants, you know, the reconstruction of Oak Street, for instance, has to be identified in the CIP in order for us to start applying for those grant monies.
Okay.
So that's another thing too. So maybe just chew on that a little bit.
And for other grant applications, they have a, sunset clause where you have to use the money by a certain, 3 years, 5 years, whatever years it is. So if we're going to be looking for applying for grants and stuff, we just have to keep that in mind to make sure that we can spend the money that we are applying
Okay.
for in a effective way, Go for it.
Well, and I was having in mind too, Mike brought up, all right, what are we looking for? And I think that we need to do some implementation of some short-term solutions, if possible, along with the long-term solutions, because there are some things that could be done immediately, and I'd like to make sure that those get done, but also have a long-term plan in mind.
Hi. Marianne Weber, 604 Grandview Drive, Hudson. I'm here representing myself as an advocate and a member of River Valley Trails, and actually to speak up a little bit for the Bicycle Advisory Committee. As far as the Bicycle Advisory Committee is concerned, it's a committee that ultimately will be in a position to advise and do some of the projects in Hudson that are related to safe biking and walking and what things should look like and studies and that type of a thing. So I'd like for them to be involved in this process so that they could be brought up to speed. And thank you for your wonderful coverage of Halloween.
Oh.
It was great. And as an advocate, I'm part of the Safe Routes to School Committee.
Yes.
And I have been, and I hope to continue to do that and to work with the school and with the city. One of my personal things also is that Hudson hasn't currently got a policy as far as what paths look like. I would like them to look more like what the guidelines suggest and say that they look like, and that is that they would be 10 to 12 feet wide. I think considering how Hudson has pursued things up to now, 12 feet is like a pipe dream. But I think we definitely should be looking at 10-foot paths and not 6 or 8-foot paths, because we're not talking about, the school kids, they walk side by side. And parents with kids and buggies and 3 bicycles traveling with them down the road, they're side by side. So we need to take into consideration what these paths should look like. The Safe Routes to School does have a study and recommendations as far as the K through 8 grades are concerned. It's a very thorough study, and a lot of good recommendations, and so the groundwork for looking at the high school is there. And they're familiar with our community. They're incredible people, and I think it would be very easy for them to come up with a study and recommendations on what should happen in the sequence. They're working with the school and the city. So, thanks.
Thank you, Marion.
Jim Weber, 604 Grandview Drive, also Hudson City Council. And I was going to bring up your point, Joyce, is that there are some interim, short-term actions that we could take immediately and that are reversible. And one of those is speed limit signs. That's absolutely reversible, and it's easy to do. So I think we should really take a look at that one. The second piece of that one is my observation is a major breaker of driving ordinances are the school buses. So they speed, they coast through signs. I live on Grandview, so I see this all the time. And I know they're trying to keep a schedule, but they've got heavy foots. So we probably need to speak to the company about that.
You had
Thank you.
said something
Yeah,
too.
Jeff already just sent
I sent a letter
Forward
after
to them.
last month's meeting to them. asking them to remind their drivers to drive with due regard and
Right.
slow it down.
Do you see it to the point where we need to do some sort of ordinance or policy change at all? As Jim suggested,
Ordinance or policy change on what?
on bus drivers? I
Well-
think that's what he had said, or no, did I miss that?
Well, I think he was saying that he doesn't feel like they're following
Oh.
So it's
the
enforcement.
state laws.
Enforcement.
Yeah, it's an
Piece.
enforcement issue.
Got it.
But if we set up safety, or school zones, then, and lower speed limits, then that's going to be easier to enforce, I would expect.
Well, it's
Or-
one of those things that hopefully you have some voluntary compliance, right?
Yes.
You know, and just a reminder, because it's a dark, long, straight roadway with no signage, you know. Sometimes maybe people can forget, you know. But I sent the information on the state statute regarding school zones. I think I highlighted the section in there that talked about the language where it says, you know, shall or should, and, you know, the differences with what those mean. But the way the statute's written, you know, Oak Street should already be, you know, a school zone.
A school zone.
Because it is a road that borders the school, and the statute is pretty clear when it says, you know, school zone signs shall be erected on those areas. So I guess my pitch to you was, you know, this is probably something that we should have done
Right.
30 years ago, you know, on, not just on Oak Street, but also on 12th Street. And then it's your discretion if you want to couple in Maple and Chestnut also into that, because the statute allows for you to create school zones in areas that funnel traffic to schools, but it's pretty specific when it's talking about the roads that immediately border schools, the way I read it.
Yeah, sorry, I looked that stuff up too, just kind of in preparation for this meeting, and it's a little bit vague. Honestly, to my reading, it looks like the roads that are like adjacent to the school property are statutory 15 miles an hour. You can put a sign up today without any issues, really.
Right,
But
it's more
it's
of a
once you
fixed
start
area.
getting away from the schools, it's where it gets a little more gray. So I think we
Right.
probably want to lump that in with our discussion of what we're studying and doing around the school, just to make sure we're all,
Right.
you don't want to put speed limit signs up unless you have your ducks in a row with making sure it's justifiable. So if somebody gets pulled over and they take you to court and, you know, all that good stuff. You got to think about that too, so.
So what do you recommend?
I mean, the streets that are immediately bordering the school, I think I would recommend, you know, signing those at the statutory limits ASAP, as far as I'm concerned. And the rest of the streets, we would probably want to study those over the winter to figure out what we
Okay.
recommend for doing that.
So you don't need direction from this committee to put the signs up now for the school zones? Or do you want us to,
I would
I think you
would
do,
want
because I
clarity.
think you
Yeah,
have to
direction.
have a funding source, and I think
Oh.
it has to be
Okay,
approved by
sure.
council and Public Works.
okay, so we should be sending this to Public Works then,
I believe that would be.
with a
the
recommendation?
To install 50, you know, school zone signage on Oak Street.
Adjacent
Adjacent.
streets.
All adjacent streets to the high school.
Yeah.
All right, I'll make the motion.
I'll second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So again, that was directed towards Public Works.
So that goes to Public Works next, yeah. Unless can it just go directly to the council? Mike, what's your pleasure? As Randy would say.
The only issue is our next Public Works Committee isn't scheduled. We have one on Monday, so I guess I could add it to the agenda for Monday. I can
Okay.
do that.
That would be
'cause
wonderful
If we
if
wait
you
till
could.
December, the ground's gonna be frozen.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be
Right.
hard pounding posts and frozen ground.
Right, well, and
Good
that's, just for future reference, is that something that has to go to Public Works Committee, or could that go right to full council?
It would have to go to
I go
Finance
I go
first,
Public
right?
Works.
What's that?
I'd go to Public Works.
Yeah.
That way I can identify a funding source, so on and so
Okay.
forth. They can approve it and then take it to council.
Yeah, especially since there's a meeting in between,
Yeah.
before council meets anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, that'd be great if you could put it in the next agenda, and then the next council finance, we approve.
Yep. I'll throw it on there tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
Good, thanks.
So that covers the speed limit signs, at least the adjacency of the streets next to the school.
Yes. Okay, so is there anything else that we can take action on? You have the letter that you.
I have that letter that I drafted, but it was farther reaching than what you guys just made a motion to, right? Because that was
Right,
the
so-
request. So we would have to alter the letter a bit and then change its
Or,
recipients.
or have a further motion to adopt some of these things as well. All right, so this, okay, so the school zone, you've got that going further out. But we can't, all right, so, but Dean said we shouldn't be making
Right,
that.
that should be part of the study.
He was
Should be part of the
recommending
study.
adjacent and then
Okay.
part of the study to extend it potentially, right?
Okay, so we need to hold off on the other streets. Okay,
Yeah, and I would say that if I can revise the letter or just create a new letter or add to that one, for all that matters, to just identify to them, once Public Works and regular council decides they want to make that a school zone, and we're going to put signs up there, then, we can communicate to them through that. We would just change the pool of recipients, I think.
is it a good idea, I mean, I think it is a good idea, when, I want your opinion. I think that this letter should go out with some changes, saying, all right, we're going to be making a school zone and listing the streets that are going to be affected, or the Public Safety Committee is recommending to Public Works Committee and to the City Council to do this, but that we're also looking at, so your paragraph is another measure the city is looking at is potentially painting a center line and fog lines. So maybe, just giving them a heads up, saying we're looking into doing this. What do you think, Mike? Have you read the letter?
I did read the
Okay.
letter, yeah. I mean, you can certainly identify it, but just say, for the time of season, we'll be, taking the first step in installing the signs and revisiting some of these other suggestions in the springtime, if it makes sense to install it at that time. So we don't want to box ourselves in either. And then just to be clear, this is just on Oak Street, correct? From basically the
For the,
12th corner, for the
signs?
For the signage, yes.
Does 12th Street border the school property too?
A little bit, yeah.
Fillmore Hill
Oh.
around the corner.
So just that little
You could almost, is that a three-way stop there? No, that's a
two-way. So a three-way intersection, two-way stop.
two-way stop. So we could almost sign it after the two-way stop, up to that intersection, keep it the same, and then after that around the corner.
Sign it on the north
Yeah.
side of Fillmore,
Yeah, right. And then all the way to basically the
Maple.
Maple corner for now.
What about Vine Street along the school as well?
Well, that's not signed.
And sounds like the law says we need to sign it.
It says we're able to if we want to, yes.
Oh, it doesn't require,
No,
because it's,
it's not
I think
required.
I don't know, the way I read it, it sounded like it
It is
did.
required. Well, then you have to look at all the schools. Are all the schools signed?
Yeah, I don't know.
Right? So, I mean, this is a can of worms you might
sounds
be
like
opening
somebody's got
up.
work to do.
So, I mean, what's your pleasure?
That's my pleasure.
Do you want to,
In terms of Vine Street specifically?
correct, do we want to open up and do basically an internal study or, just to review what's currently out there around all of our schools? And if the law states that they have to be signed school zone, we should maybe make a list of all the schools that need to have the signage added to.
Go out and do some recon.
Yep.
Since that's not on the agenda,
Yeah.
I don't know
Right,
that we
right.
can,
No, so,
but I think it should be put on the next agenda. So having that information in front of us for the next agenda would probably be helpful.
yeah, and I could get some costs associated with
Yeah.
that too, because it's going to be
Okay.
expensive. So,
Okay. Wow,
Okay, we're not
That's a
quite
lot.
done with this yet, are we?
right.
So, all right, so Vine Street, and I guess when I made the motion, I was figuring that since Vine Street is
Adjacent
adjacent
to,
to a school, that it was included in this, but,
Have you, do you know the law? Do you, I
Do
mean,
still
have you read
do
it?
you have
on-
the statute? Or do you guys have it in your packet, right?
You know, the thing with Vine Street is there are pedestrian accommodations on both the north and south side of the road, right? Then we have a controlled four-way intersection at Vine and Wisconsin. We have a
That's just the issue sheet.
rectangular rapid flashing beacon just west of 12th Street there. So it's not like the kids are walking on the shoulder like they are on the back
Yeah.
of Oak Street.
right.
It's a little different. So
It is a little different.
does someone
because it's
have
got
the
that four-way
statute?
stop sign too.
Should we bring that
I
back?
thought I had attached it to the agenda. It's my fault for not.
yeah,
Well, I
didn't
remember
see
getting it, but was
Right.
it on the
Was it
last
on
agenda?
email or?
Might have been on the last agenda. I don't have that on my iPad.
So Vine is currently not marked, never was marked.
And if you're marking Vine adjacent to the school property, you're basically marking from
The
12th
top of the
Street.
hill.
12th,
12th.
yeah, just east of 12th Street to the four-way intersection. And
A little beyond that.
I mean, there's
Yeah.
really not much distance there.
No.
If you really think about it, right?
Well, but if the law expects us to, I mean, is this something that we should be running past Kathy?
Yeah. We could, well, I think if we look at the state statute, we could
Okay.
probably make a determination. So,
Is that something that you think you could find out prior to the Public Works? And then you're making a recommendation from
yeah,
the Public Works Committee
it that
back
way.
to council?
yeah, that's fine.
That'll work.
Is that,
Yes.
do we need to amend the motion?
I don't
It
think
just
so.
says that the motion is adjacent to, so.
Okay. And then
First
in
statute
Public
or
Works,
something.
if you can outline that adjacency.
So here is what the statute says. Wisconsin Statute 118.08, school zones and crossings. Sub 1, on any street or highway which borders the grounds of any public, private, or tribal school in which school is held for a term of not less than 6 months, the authority in charge of the maintenance of the street or highway shall erect black and yellow school warning signs. The authority may also designate school crossings across any street or highway, whether or not the street or highway borders the grounds of the school. So, at minimum, I think the statute says we have to put
Right.
the black and yellow school warning signs up.
Right.
So the question is
As a
whether
school
we
zone.
want to change it to a 15 mile per hour speed limit.
I think one thing I just want to interject a little bit here is, I think Mike makes a good point. I think the may is really something good and address it from a staff level and a practicality standpoint, because also we have to remember, we have the middle school and Rivercrest. That I don't know how, I mean, I think the warning, absolutely we need the warnings there, but to make them all 15 miles an hour, I don't, in my mind, isn't really realistic
Okay.
because of where they're at, but and I think it's awesome that we have a staff engineer that can
Yes.
address all this now and give us a perspective that we're a professional perspective
Yeah.
on it. So that's just my 2 cents.
Okay. All right, so let's get recommendations from staff then.
On the specific adjacency, specific streets.
Well, yeah, on which streets we should be doing
And if
15
it's
mile
speed
an
limit.
hour
Mhm.
speed limits. So all we've done now is ask that they put up the school zone signs. And so then, and ask them to let us know what they think about 15 mile per hour
Okay.
speed limits, right?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay,
As long as that's
and are
your
you happy with that?
understanding. I'm happy with that.
Okay.
The motion was for 15 mile per hour signs, not school zones, so do you
No, it
want to
was
amend
for,
that?
was it for 15 mile?
Yeah.
Oh,
So the statute regarding fixed limits also addresses the speed limit issue. And that's 346.57, sub 4, fixed limits. 15 miles per hour when passing a schoolhouse at those times when children are going to and from school or are playing within the sidewalk area at or about the school. 15 miles per hour when passing an intersection or other location properly marked with a school crossing sign of type approved by the department. When the following conditions exist: child is present, school crossing guard is within the crosswalk at the intersection or at another location. If there is no crosswalk that exists, is in the roadway at the intersection or other location. School crossing guard is placing in or removing from the roadway at or near the intersection or the other location a temporary sign or device that guides, warns, or regulates traffic. 15 miles per hour when passing a safety zone occupied by pedestrians, but I think safety zones are basically school zones in the rural areas.
Oh, okay.
And then it talks about 15 miles per hour in the alley. But that's the section that talks about 15 miles an hour by the schools.
So we don't have crossing guards there, so then,
There are crossing guards on Wisconsin and Vine.
oh, there are,
Yeah.
okay. But,
Does it say it's required, Jeff, in a school zone?
Those are fixed limits, so technically by statute, they're not even required to be signed. You're supposed to understand that.
Sure.
That's the difference between a fixed limit and a posted limit.
Okay. Learn something.
yeah, all right, so now, back to our original motion, and what, so the original motion was for posting 15-mile-an-hour
Yep.
speed limit signs.
Adjacent to the school, the high school.
All right. What do you think, Mike? Should we change the motion or leave everything?
Keep it.
Okay, because everything's going to Public Works, so Public Works can make modifications if necessary.
That's fine. Well, it's 15 miles an hour when children are present.
Yes.
Okay,
Which is essentially what a school zone sign says anyway.
right,
Because it's
Alright.
25 miles an hour or 35, depending where the school is.
right.
Unless children are present, then it's 15.
Okay, so we don't need to make any modifications now? Okay.
One down.
What's that?
I said one down.
Okay. All right. I guess with this letter, I'll make the motion that we direct staff, meaning Jeff and Mike, to revise the letter and send it out, and unless,
To what residents do you want that sent to?
wow. Yeah, what do you recommend?
I would basically just pick a point, midpoint on Oak Street, do a radius out, and mail those residents, you know.
Well, we should probably hit the Vine Street residents too then, right? So you extend your radius out that far?
Probably. Yep.
Okay.
Is that something like 300 feet from the roadway or whatever? Or how would you define that?
The radius.
Define the radius?
Yeah.
I don't know, I'll go to a mapping tool and figure it
Okay.
out.
Okay, I'm figuring just probably anybody who's within about 2 blocks from any
It's tough.
part
because,
of
I mean,
the
you
school
get-
property.
You throw a dart.
Right. Everybody drives on Vine Street in the morning, right? So,
Would it be worth, that third paragraph, another immediate measure the city is looking at, is changing that into the more broad, that you guys are taking this under, that you're looking at it over the course of the entire winter and making recommendations moving forward,
Yeah,
and
we
make it
can
a little bit
factor it
more
out.
broad instead of specific?
That's why I suggested the two of them work together on
Okay,
this, so that they
perfect,
can,
perfect.
because they can decide what the residents need to know. I would also suggest, though, that behind the high school, we've got people all the way up to the cul-de-sac on Chestnut that have expressed concerns. So maybe make it a little bit broader behind the high school because that area is.
Well, and that's why I included Chestnut, is because that's where the complaints of the bus traffic were
Yes.
coming in and the kids walking in the road, right? So I think,
You mean
Yeah.
north of Ash? North
Yeah,
of
even
Ash?
north of Ash, yes.
Yeah.
yeah, essentially from Ash to Maple, it's because the buses come Grandview to Ash to Chestnut
Sure.
to Oak, well, to Maple and then to Oak.
Yeah. You know, and the other thing too with the letter is we don't want to box ourselves in, or we don't want to throw money haphazardly at the situation just to throw money at it. You know, we want to be
Right.
diligent, and we
Yes.
want to make sure that the money that we are going to be spending is both a
Properly
short-term
invested.
and part of the long-term solution, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So that's another thing too that we'll have to sit down as staff and conversations with the school district, so on and so forth in the next couple months. So,
Well, and I'm also thinking, all right, with this letter, maybe, working with the school district to see if there are certain families in that area that should be informed that aren't necessarily right in that radius, but live behind the school.
sure.
I don't know.
No.
Mike and I can sit down and
Yeah,
figure it out.
I'll,
Yep.
all right.
So is there a motion on the floor?
Yeah, I believe I made the motion that we direct Mike and Jeff to write the letter. And did you
I'll second.
second? Okay.
Is that what? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, anything else that needs to be discussed on the high school issue? Did we miss anything?
I don't think so. That's all I had in my notes.
Okay,
Okay.
good.
Thank you.
Sorry that I didn't attach those statutes to the issue sheet.
I know you sent them out, so they might be in the last,
It may have been something I sent separately after the
Right.
last
okay.
meeting.
Oh,
just
that could be,
To give you
yeah.
information.
That sounds right.
Got lost in translation, my apologies.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks, Mike. So we are up to discussion and possible action on pedestrian crossing safety on Carmichael Road near the middle school. And again, this is a letter that we received from Tim Erickson, sent to you, Chief, is that correct? Now, I remember, didn't we have this conversation about that specific crosswalk last year? Or earlier this summer, and we did,
It was last year.
was it
Yeah, we
last
had
year?
Last year about this time when
Yeah,
it's,
And we did corrective, what did we do corrective to?
painted lines on the street for the crosswalks.
And is that an ADA intersection there with a ramp?
Well, I know currently where the trail comes across, just north of the St. Croix Government Center, there's a crosswalk, but it doesn't lead to another pedestrian refuge on the east side of Carmichael.
Okay,
So that would have to be somehow included. So, go ahead.
what, no, I,
So, I mean, Tim obviously sent us another email regarding some of the situations up there. There is a controlled three-way,
four-way.
four-way intersection up there. But I assume kids are crossing, they're coming from like Grandview area, Ash.
right.
There's that path behind
Path
the
behind the
YMCA
Y-
that comes up along Oak Ridge,
Yeah.
that goes across Carmichael.
Instead of when they come to Carmichael on the path, instead of going to the north on the path and then crossing at the controlled intersection, they're just hopping across Carmichael right at where the trail comes out, right?
Because I don't think there's a sidewalk
To the north.
to the north,
So,
on the west side of the road.
sure.
So they try to get them across to the
Oh,
walking
right.
path on the east side of Carmichael and take them to the school.
Okay.
So it's the two crossings, it's primarily the two crossings. One of them does have a street light right above it, but the crosswalk kind of doesn't lead to anywhere. It kind of goes, it goes to the path over there, but it, over a shoulder and through the woods,
ditch and-
kind of
Sure.
thing, yeah. And then the other one is a four-way controlled intersection, but it's very dark. There's no lighting there. And I think that's their concern, is just the overall traffic volume, high traffic volumes at that time of the day. with crossing guards, and they have the reflective vests on, and they have the flashing stop signs, right? And they've done everything that they can try to do to make it safe, but, I mean, I've been there in the morning, right, to check it out, and it's very dark. And then they've got cones to direct the bus traffic, right,
Yeah.
into the parking lot, because they had to make that lane a little wider because the buses can't make that turn. So there's a lot going on in that intersection, and that's the primary crossing for kids coming from the Borough Oak, Somerset Knoll kind of neighborhood back in there.
And they still have flag crossing there, right? Flagman? At those
At the controlled
intersections?
intersection, do they have crossing guards at the
Yeah, I was gonna
controls?
ask, where are the
They do have a
crossing
crossing
guards?
They do.
They have a crossing guard there, and they have a crossing guard at the one further to the south.
Okay, wait, I got the map up here. And, all right, so Wren crosses Carmichael.
Yep, that's not in the
So
city.
that's not in the city, yep. But there's no sidewalk on,
The north side.
the residential side. But there is a path on the school side.
The east side, yep.
All right, and so then there are two entrances, Burlow Curve, because it goes around. So you've got the east end of Burlow Curve and then the south end of Burlow Curve.
Yep.
It's very confusing. So are there crossing guards at both intersections with Burlow Curve?
I don't know. I don't know.
The Borough Oak curve that enters the middle school parking lot,
Yes.
I believe would be the north junction. That's the four-way stop sign.
Right.
Okay,
And
that's the
there,
south junction,
South
yeah.
Junction.
south junction. And there is a crosswalk, or the crossing guard there. And then the other crossing guard is south of that, from the walking path that goes
Okay,
to the south of the Oak Ridge Circle neighborhood.
Right.
So from a traffic flow standpoint, instead of having, people are going north, they come to that trail with a crosswalk that leads to nowhere. If you were to actually make that an actual stop, flashing beacon crossing, you'll have traffic backed up for kids crossing there. Then they get through there, and then they go another 75 to 100 feet, and they come to the intersection, and they're waiting for kids to cross there. I would almost recommend, instead of spending the money on doing the flashing beacon at that point, actually look into extending, when that trail comes out to Carmichael, actually doing a sidewalk or a trail extension to the north to the controlled four-way intersection and do all the crossings there. Dean, if that makes sense from an engineering standpoint, but I'm just trying to think of, from traffic flow, you go here, you stop, then you go in and you stop, and you just, traffic congestion's already where
A
they
lot of
could-
these issues would probably be alleviated if people coming from that path, which takes kids from the far west side of the city up that path, and if you could get them to one crossing, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That's essentially what the high school does on the south side of the high school from Wisconsin Street, is everybody funnels to that one intersection and then
Right.
crosses.
Yeah, and then you can control it more, right? You can release the kids in waves and not, so it's
Right.
from
They can, and they'll do that. The crossing guards will hold them until they get a handful, 10, 12 kids.
Right.
And then they'll cross.
Yeah. So maybe maybe staff can reach out. I know we're gonna set up a meeting with Tim and school district staff. Maybe this is one thing that we can maybe suggest to them looking into the future. Maybe include it on a project for next year's project schedule, because it's not I don't think it's a very large.
no, looking
Even
on
if
the map.
we could use, there's different assessment tools, so on and so forth, sidewalk repair money in the CIP too. But I think that from my perspective, and Dean, maybe you want to speak to it, but I mean, my perspective, that probably make the most sense to just have one centralized crossing at the controlled intersection, which currently exists, instead of adding, those rectangular rapid flashing beacons are nice, but they're expensive, right? They're about
Right.
$20,000. And then you're looking at adding a pedestrian accommodations on the east side of Carmichael, so on and so forth, to accommodate that crosswalk, because we got a lot of crosswalks in the city that lead to nowhere, and I don't want to add another one. So,
The
that's
only
my,
other
that's my
thing-
recommendation.
And the only other thing that I am at least personally concerned with that intersection is the lack of lighting.
Yeah, and we can maybe we can Excel Energy, we've reached out in times past and added streetlights here and there, intersections that are dark, so we can certainly reach out to Excel Energy as well and request a cost for installation and, monthly charge, what that would be. So
Yeah.
we can bring that back to the Public Works Committee or here, whichever you prefer.
All right. So,
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I just had one comment regarding that trail crossing where they want the RFB at. The only caveat that I would see is that I would like to know kind of where kids are supposed to be going in the school, because if they're supposed to be going in the school, like kind of where that trail crossing leads to, if you're going to send them up and then over and then down,
oh,
they might not do that. They might just
Okay,
cut across in a now not marked spot,
Yeah.
I think it would just have to be looked at just a little bit further, just to kind of see if it makes sense to send them up and over, if people are going to actually do that in the future.
Because there is two, to your point, there are two entrances into the middle school, right? There's one where the buses come around.
Yep, there's
and
one in the
there's to
front by the
south.
lobby, one in the back by the buses, and that's adjacent to the Prairie Elementary.
Right, right.
Yeah, and that could be something we could work with the school district. Maybe if we want them to go up to that northerly access, maybe it's something internally they can have their kids. If there's anybody going to the back entrance, they can have them go to the front
yeah,
instead.
And I think
that
that's
kind of
something
thing.
we can, when we meet with the school districts, we can probably,
Sure.
that can be one of the discussion points.
so it sounds like you need a motion to direct staff to work with the school district to come up with a plan that, for the Public Safety Committee and the Public Works Committee to discuss.
Sounds good.
All right, so moved.
I'll second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Once
Opposed?
we get those motions figured out, we can,
Just,
Motion
just
carries.
one thing that I'm thinking on that, is that part of the reconstruction plan
Oh, for Carmichael, you
on
mean?
Carmichael? Does it go that far? Is it that far reaching, or?
I believe the reconstruction of Carmichael, the full build-out scenario, ends kind of right at where that path crossing is.
Okay.
Like at that
So it's,
intersection.
I knew it was
Really?
close, I didn't know if that was gonna be.
Wow.
It could be lumped into there very easily if it's not already in it, too.
It might be an idea, I don't know. I was just thinking about that because the last council meeting, we were talking about the different grant funds that might be available for that. And
Yep.
Thank you. All right, any more on that? Now we're talking discussion and possible action on pedestrian crossing flag policy and stop yield sign
Yeah,
policy.
so at our last department head meeting, we uncovered, well, basically, we were trying to centralize all of our city policies and things so that they were accessible to everybody when we wanted to find them. And we were tasked as department heads with finding these policies that we were aware of that the city uses, and then to put them in the centralized location. These two policies I felt were most conducive, I suppose, to the Public Safety Committee, the ones that I knew about. And we couldn't find an adoption date where council actually adopted them into policy. So I put this on the agenda to have a discussion, or to have you guys have a discussion essentially, to determine, do you want these as policies? And if so, I'm pretty sure council has to adopt
it.
them into
Adopt it.
policy. Or do you just want to use them as guidelines and guiding principles when making decisions? In which case, you wouldn't have to necessarily adopt it into policy. So that's why this item is on the agenda, to figure out, do you want these to be full-fledged city policies that you are going to follow moving forward, or do you want to make them just guiding principles or guidelines, or, I mean, it's to your pleasure, but that's why this is on the agenda.
what does
Thank you.
staff recommend?
You guys are going to come to every meeting.
You better get us a name tag up here. Excuse me. I had talked to Jeff earlier today because I didn't even realize this was a subject on the until I looked at the agenda today. I'm like, oh,
You're
that's
still adjusting
interesting. I think it'd be helpful to have a adopted policy, but I also would really love to be able to look at it before we update it, as it looks like it's been around for a while, and I just want to make sure that what we have as a guidance or standard is what makes sense. But I think maybe it's something that we as staff can look at, revise, and bring back
Okay.
for future action by this committee and wherever else it needs to go.
I'll make the motion to do that then.
And I'll second that. Did you get that?
Did not. Sorry.
Okay, so we are directing city engineer and
City staff, yeah.
city staff to take a look at the current policies for crossing flag and stop yield sign policy, to make a recommendation on adopting that as a policy,
Yeah,
making revisions. Now is that clear as mud?
got it.
Okay.
All right, so motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And we're up to informational items. You have anything, Joyce?
I can't think of anything. We've put quite a few things onto the next agenda already.
Gotcha. One thing that I do want to cover is I had a conversation with our city administrator, just taking a look again sort of at this body in terms of, do we have sort of marching orders, or do we have sort of that mission statement for this body about what sort of directional pieces? Because again, we do have Public Works and the engineer
Yes.
here, and it kind of feels like an amalgamation of functions. I just want to have a clear, I think that's something that I would like to talk about at that next.
Okay.
The city administrator, Aaron, had said that he was going to kind of look into that and thought that was a good idea, just to make sure that, and maybe for all committees going forward, so.
Should we invite him to
Yeah, I think,
visit and let us know what he thinks
mhm.
the mission should be included in the mission statement?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Cool. All right, with that, department updates. Scott, with fire?
I just have a few sidewalk crossings and stuff I'd like to bring up that the fire department has issues with, and then. Anyway, fire station's coming along. They're a little bit behind with the weather, but moving forward. So we're keeping busy with that. Been busy with runs and that lately. Cross river for a few fires and helping them out. From the emergency management standpoint, I've been looking and reviewing the EOP and revising that and updating it, and I'm hoping, if everything goes right, to have that out next month.
Wow.
And it's a living document, so it'll be, every year it will be updated and that, and, maybe probably improved upon, but at least we can get one in place that's somewhat realistic, and then, again, we'll improve it with all the departments. And as you can see, I think once we get a new set of eyes on everything, I think, we'll probably be seeing more information from Public Works and that in the plan down the road. The sirens, emergency sirens, we had someone come in and go through all those and did routine maintenance on that. I'm going to have a routine maintenance program set up for that. We're also looking at addressing, I talked to Mike Johnson about, there is one at the fire station, and that moving forward with the RFP or whatever they decide, that we should address that, where that's going to be, if that's changed location after the fire department moves out. And so at least it's known that something has to be done with it early on in the process.
Great. Thank you.
So, yeah, that's about it.
Chief Williams?
I don't really have any updates other than the parking system stuff is live now, went live on Monday. The pay stations, the LPR system, all the back office things seem to be working very well. So we're in this educational phase with the community to try and get them comfortable with the new system. And we're working out some kinks, right? As with any new system, there are some things that that we have to figure out, but we're working through those as we find them, and by the end of the month, you know, we should be pretty well up to speed. We've got the applications all in for the second part-time enforcement officer, so we'll be doing interviews here coming up to get that person up to speed and get them on board and training. So things are moving along with that. We're very happy right now with the deployment so far. Every day, people seem to be more and more comfortable with the system, and you see them using the system and engaging with it. So that's been really good to see. Monday obviously was low use and high question volume, and it's starting to go the other way. And after only 4 days, really, I think that's pretty miraculous. I think that speaks to, you know, the way that the city rolled it out and put it together, but it also speaks to, you know, the community, that they understood, right? They understood the concept of paid parking, and I'm not going to say that they're embracing it, but I think they're at least accepting it. So it's looking really good.
Okay. Yeah, and just an aside, I talked to Aaron about it this afternoon and asked about committee members and city council members, and he said that he's working on some kind of a tag for our cars so that when we're on city business, we can
Yep,
put
there's
those
a
on our
placard
windshield.
system that they should be here next week or the week after, I think Tiffany said. But they'll be numbered, so we'll assign them out so that we know who they belong to, so that we can try to limit abuse, you know. But we
So
have.
that we don't
have
abuse
system in
the
place.
privilege when we're going out for dinner and,
Right.
Well, and there's several entities like the FIPS, you know, has
Yeah.
a lot of volunteers that,
yeah,
you know, we're gonna provide them with some placards
Okay.
so that their volunteers can.
that makes sense. And the library is another.
The library is a whole separate issue, but
Yes.
we're working through that. That's gonna be, it's gonna be free for library and police department users. It's just, some things on the back end and some additional training that we have to do, but we'll get it figured out. It's one of those, that's why I think we decided to do a 4-week or a month-long kind of rollout phase, is because we knew there was gonna be bugs to work
Kinks and-
out.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
And we'll get it figured out, you know? So it's good.
Yeah.
Overall, it's been good.
yeah, and then we've got the free parking during the Christmas season, so then that
Only the
goes
first 3
additional.
hours.
Huh?
Only
Okay,
the
only
first
3
3
hours.
hours.
Okay.
After that, then you have to pay.
Question for you. How did the Halloween on 3rd Street go?
Excellent. Excellent. A lot of very positive feedback. As we've stated in the past years, it seems to be growing in popularity every year, so it's been a good measure for you guys to approve
Yeah,
the road closures up there. It's just made everything a lot more safe to be out there, so.
Great.
good. Yeah, people had positive things to say about it on Facebook. And some of the residents were talking about 1,500 to 2,000 kids that came to their door. So,
Wow.
yeah, I think that I'm glad that we were able to do that.
It's a good move. Anything else, Chief?
Nothing else for me.
All right. Other items for future agendas? I see that I threw mine in for informational items. Do you have anything, though? No.
Move to adjourn.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody.